On the Alaskan ice, Ethan's headlights caught a ship buried beneath the snow. He and Ash stepped inside, red lights flickered, air frozen still. Then, a woman's voice whispered from the black box. "If you hear this, Project Eden has failed. Don't open the storage bay." Ethan froze. The voice didn't just echo through the ship. It echoed inside him, like the past refusing to stay buried. Share this story. Comment your thoughts if it gave you chills, and subscribe for more stories of faith. The night spread across northern Alaska like an endless shroud of frost. Wind howled through the valley, sweeping over the frozen tundra where snow glittered under a pale moon. Beneath that silence stood a solitary wooden cabin, its chimney breathing faint smoke into the cold air. Inside, Ethan Cole, a former U.S. Marine in his mid-40s, sat near the fire with a tin cup of black coffee, his German shepherd Ash resting at his boots. Ethan's face bore the rugged calm of a man who had seen too much. Short brown hair streaked with gray-framed eyes, the color of steel, steady, but haunted. He had left the Marines 10 years earlier, after a failed rescue mission in Kandahar that had cost his team their lives. Since then, silence had become his only companion, except for Ash. The dog, now 8 years old, was broad-shouldered, with black and white fur and amber eyes that glimmered like embers. Once a K-9 partner trained to detect explosives, Ash still carried himself with disciplined grace, alert, loyal, and impossibly human in the way he watched Ethan's every move. That night, the storm arrived faster than predicted. Wind slammed against the cabin walls, rattling the windows. Ethan grabbed his coat, stepped outside, and squinted through the swirling snow. The land beyond was a vast white sea. As he tightened his scarf, Ash barked once, sharp and urgent. A faint vibration came through the ground low, metallic, unnatural. The dog's ears rose, and Ethan felt his chest tighten. It wasn't thunder. It was something shifting beneath the ice. He took his snowmobile and followed Ash's lead toward the open plain. The blizzard clawed at his face, slicing through his gloves. Ash ran ahead, his form a shadow in the white storm, until he stopped near a ridge where the ice had cracked open. Ethan dismounted, the beam of his flashlight cutting through mist and snow. The ground there shimmered smooth, curved, metallic. He brushed away a layer of frost and froze. Letters etched into steel read faintly, U.S. Biodefense Division, Eden's Vault. A buried research vessel, half swallowed by ice and time. Ethan's breath quickened. Memories of old Marine briefings stirred rumors about Cold War biological tests conducted in Alaska, sealed after an incident that no one spoke of again. He scanned the hull for an entry hatch, found a rusted ladder descending into darkness, and muttered, "Let's see what you've got, Eden." Ash whined softly, reluctant but obedient, following his master down the icy shaft. Inside, the air was thick with decay and chemical cold. Frost clung to the walls, and wires hung like veins of some dead creature. Ethan's flashlight flickered over consoles covered in dust. He pressed a button on a cracked terminal. Weak power surged through the corridor. Red emergency lights blinked to life, bathing everything in crimson. Then came the sound, a distorted female voice, soft but trembling, from a speaker. Overhead. "If you're hearing this, Project Eden has failed. Do not open the storage bay." The words echoed through the steel chamber, lingering like a ghost's warning. Ethan froze, heart pounding. "Failed?" he murmured. "Failed at what?" Ash paced beside him, growling low. They followed the sound toward the lower deck. There, rows of cryotubes lined the walls, most shattered, some smeared with old frozen blood. Inside the unbroken tubes, nothing moved, only fragments of fabric and frost. The air smelled faintly of ethanol and iron. Ethan leaned closer to one console, brushing off frost to reveal an old log screen. Power flickered long enough for a single phrase to appear. Containment breach the 19th of December, 1983. His throat went dry. Whatever happened here hadn't been an accident. It was a cover-up. He exhaled slowly, whispering, "What the hell did they keep down here?" Suddenly, the floor shuddered. From somewhere outside, a dull metallic clang echoed across the hull. Ethan turned off his flashlight and crouched, instinct sharp. Through the porthole above, faint lights flickered, white beams cutting across the blizzard. Someone else was out there. Vehicles. He could hear the distant hum of engines, too precise to be civilians. Ash growled again, his body tense. Ethan whispered, "Easy, boy." He pressed his back against the wall, listening as muffled voices drifted through the wind. They were searching, organized, methodical. He caught a word that made his blood run cold. Eden. They knew about the ship. They had come for it. Ethan switched off the remaining power, plunging the vessel into darkness. The red lights died, leaving only the soft sound of wind moaning through broken vents. In that silence, he realized two things. First, the ship wasn't as dead as it seemed. Second, he and Ash weren't alone anymore. He placed a hand on the dog's head. "Time to go, partner," he whispered. "Whatever this is, we're in it now." Outside, the storm howled louder, burying their footprints as they vanished into the night. Behind them, deep within the ship, a single indicator light blinked back to life, a faint blue pulse, steady and waiting. Snow still fell thick and heavy over the valley when Ethan Cole reached the ridge above the buried vessel. The storm had swallowed the world, but through the white veil, faint lights moved like insects crawling across the dark. He crouched low beside a cluster of rocks. Ash pressed close to his leg, tail stiff, ears forward. Through the binoculars, Ethan saw three figures in matte black gear approaching the ship. Their movements were synchronized military precision. No insignia, no visible names, just black rifles and mirrored visors that reflected the storm's fury. The leader was taller than the others, broad-shouldered, with a confident, almost arrogant posture. When he removed his hood, Ethan caught the pale glint of a scar running from his jaw to his temple. That was Reeves, a man Ethan vaguely remembered from old military briefings, once an Army intelligence operative who had gone private after a scandal involving civilian casualties overseas. Reeves' sharp eyes scanned every shadow. A man trained to distrust everything, including himself. His voice crackled over the radio. "Confirming target Eden's vault. Thermal signature active. Someone's been here recently." Ethan's pulse tightened. He and Ash crawled backward, careful not to crunch the ice. Reeves knelt beside the hull, brushing frost away with a gloved hand, while the other two, one short and stocky, the other lean with a visible limp, set up equipment that looked more like recovery gear than weapons. "We'll take what we can. Torch the rest," Reeves ordered. Then, with a slow turn of his head, he looked directly toward the ridge. Ethan froze. Reeves' instincts were as sharp as ever. "Tracks," Reeves muttered, crouching near a patch of disturbed snow. "Fresh. Within the hour." Ethan didn't wait. He tugged Ash's collar and retreated down the slope. The wind carried the faint buzz of the men's radios, words like containment, bioasset, retrieval order. He understood enough to know they weren't archaeologists. They were cleaners, and anything they couldn't recover they would erase, including witnesses. By the time Ethan reached his cabin, dawn had begun to bleed gray across the horizon. The old generator coughed and groaned when he powered it up. Inside, the cabin smelled of burnt coffee and oil. He took off his gloves, hands trembling slightly as he booted the battered communication terminal on his desk. The screen flickered to life, with static. Come on," he muttered, tuning the frequency. Finally, a voice broke through. "Cole, that you?" Tom Rivera's voice carried the rough warmth of someone who'd spent half his life in the wild. Tom, now in his 50s, was a local geologist, stocky, with wind-cracked skin and thick black hair streaked with gray. A quiet man, but sharp as obsidian. He had been Ethan's only real friend since he'd left the Marines, the kind who fixed your truck and never asked why you drank too much. "Tom," Ethan said, exhaling, "you still remember that site you told me about? The one buried under Glacier Point?" There was silence on the other end. Then Tom replied, voice low, serious. "You found it." Ethan nodded. "It's called Eden's Vault, some kind of Defense Department relic. And Tom? Someone else found it too." Tom cursed under his breath. "That place isn't a myth, Ethan. It was a biological weapons site shut down after '83. The Army sealed it and buried it under 20 feet of ice. If North Point's involved, they're not looking for history. They're cleaning evidence." Ethan frowned. "North Point Biotech. That's private sector, not government." "Same thing these days," Tom said grimly. "Listen, get out of there. If they know you've seen it, they won't just warn you off. They'll erase the whole map to keep it buried." Ethan leaned back in his chair, the floorboards creaking beneath his boots. His reflection in the frosted window looked like a ghost, unshaven, exhausted, and older than his years. "I'm not running, Tom," he said quietly. "Not again." He thought of the mission that had ended his career the night his unit was ordered to retreat, leaving civilians trapped under fire. He had followed orders then, and it had haunted him every day since. This time, he wouldn't turn away. Ash lifted his head suddenly, ears twitching. The hair on his back bristled. Ethan's instincts kicked in. He killed the lights, crouched low, and moved to the window. Through the white blur of snow, a faint red beam swept across the tree line, a laser sight, moving slow and deliberate. Then came the muted crunch of boots in snow. Someone was outside. Ethan grabbed his rifle from the rack near the door, chambered around, and motioned for Ash to stay behind the counter. His breath fogged against the glass as he peeked through a crack in the curtain. 3 silhouettes moved along the ridge above his cabin, black figures against the white. Reeves and his men had found him. A laser dot danced across the window frame, stopping inches from his head. Without hesitation, Ethan rolled to the floor as the glass shattered. The shot exploded through the cabin, splintering the chair where he had been sitting seconds before. Ash barked furiously. Ethan crawled behind the stove, returning 2 precise shots into the storm. Sparks flew as bullets tore into the cabin walls. Reeves' voice echoed from outside, calm and commanding. "Cole, we don't need to kill you. Just hand over what you found." Ethan shouted back, "I didn't take anything." "Then prove it," Reeves replied. "Come out unarmed." Ethan hesitated. The storm roared louder, masking every sound except the thud of boots approaching. He looked at Ash, who stood poised at the door, muscles taut. "Stay with me, boy," he whispered. The dog growled low, ready to strike. Ethan slipped through the back hatch, crouching low as snow whipped into his face. He circled behind the cabin and spotted Reeves' men moving toward the front door. In a burst of motion, Ethan hurled a flare into the snow, its red light cutting through the blizzard. For an instant, confusion scattered them. He and Ash vanished into the woods behind the ridge. Minutes later, Reeves reached the cabin, eyes narrowing at the empty space where Ethan's footprints trailed into the storm. "He's not going far," Reeves muttered. "No one ever does out here." He turned to his men. "Find him. And when you do, make it look like the cold got him." Far off in the trees, Ethan stopped to catch his breath, snow clinging to his beard and lashes. He looked down at Ash, whose eyes glowed faintly in the dark. "We just made their list, buddy," he said softly. "Now we find out why Eden's worth killing for." The wind swallowed his voice, carrying it into the storm. Somewhere behind them, the faint hum of engines began again, closing in. Ethan drove through the forest roads as dawn broke pale over the horizon. Snow blanketed the trees like ash after a fire, and the narrow trail ahead twisted between dark trunks. The old pickup rattled under his hands, its windshield streaked with frost. Ash sat in the passenger seat, muzzle pressed against the window, ears alert. His fur caught the cold light, every breath forming mist on the glass. Ethan's heart still pounded from the firefight. He could feel the phantom heat of bullets in his memory and the old ache of guilt creeping back. After nearly an hour of driving, The tree line opened to reveal a small roadside diner beside a frozen airstrip abandoned except for a single SUV parked near the door. Ethan slowed. Through the window, he saw a woman sitting in a corner booth with a boy beside her. She looked up as he entered, her gaze sharp, searching, almost defensive. Rachel Moore was in her mid-30s, tall and lean, with shoulder-length auburn hair and pale skin that had lost its city softness to the northern cold. Her eyes, gray, intelligent, and constantly observing, spoke of sleepless nights and stories too dangerous to print. She wore a thick parka, though beneath it her posture was tense, ready to bolt. "Ethan Cole?" she asked, voice low. "Tom said you might come." He nodded. "You're the reporter?" "Investigative journalist," she corrected, sliding a file folder toward him. "Washington Post, until they decided North Point was too big to name on the record." Her smile was brief, tired. The boy beside her looked up curiously. Liam Moore, 10 years old, had his mother's gray eyes but the open, unguarded face of a child still learning what to fear. His dark blonde hair was messy beneath a wool cap, and his hands clutched a small handheld game console, though the batteries had long since died. He stared at Ash with awe. "Is he a police dog?" the boy asked. "Retired," Ethan replied. "Smarter than most men I served with." Ash wagged his tail once, as if acknowledging the compliment. Rachel leaned forward. "Tom told me you found something out there. A ship. Frozen under the glacier." Ethan hesitated. "Found it by accident. Government markings. Biodefense Division." Rachel's expression hardened. "Then it's real." She opened the folder. Inside were copies of classified contracts, satellite photos, and shipping manifests. North Point Biotech's name shows up everywhere in the old records. They were subcontracted for a project called Eden's Vault, officially a climate research vessel, but it carried human genome archives and pathogenic samples. It was designed to restart the population if a biological war wiped us out. Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's not research. That's playing God." Rachel met his gaze. "It's worse. According to these documents, they were experimenting with controlled gene modification trying to create disease-resistant embryos. They called them genetic seeds." Outside, the wind picked up, whistling against the diner's cracked windows. Ethan rubbed his temples, the weight of it pressing down. "You said Tom sent you here." "Why?" "Because they've been following me," Rachel said quietly. 2 weeks ago, someone broke into my apartment in D.C. They didn't take my files, they left a note. Stop digging. I sent the rest of my research to a colleague in Anchorage, then left with Liam. She smiled faintly, but her eyes didn't soften. Tom said if anyone could help me prove Eden existed, it would be you. Ethan looked toward the boy. You brought your kid into this? Rachel's voice sharpened. You think I had a choice? Every journalist who touched this story disappeared. I couldn't leave him behind. For a moment, her composure cracked just enough to reveal fear beneath the resolve. Ethan stood, restless. You shouldn't have come to me. Reeves and his team are already here. They killed to keep this buried. At the sound of that name, Rachel's lips tightened. Reeves works for North Point. He's been their cleaner for years. He was part of the task force that shut Eden down after the 1983 outbreak in Alaska. Back then, they blamed it on a virus leak, but the truth is, one of their subjects escaped. Ethan frowned. Subjects? Human test cases, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Children. Silence filled the diner, broken only by the groan of wind against the roof. Liam looked between them, his young face pale with confusion. Ethan sat back down, the words sinking into him like lead. Memories surfaced again, his own daughter, lost years ago in a hospital fire while he was overseas. He felt the old ache twist sharper. I'm not your hero, Miss Moore, he said. I came here to disappear, not to start another war. Rachel studied him for a long moment. Maybe disappearing isn't what you were meant to do, she said softly. Tom thought you'd understand because you've seen what happens when orders go wrong. Before Ethan could reply, Ash suddenly lifted his head and growled. A deep warning rumble. Through the window, a flicker of light passed across the snow headlights, approaching fast. Rachel's hand went instinctively to Liam's shoulder. Ethan's pulse spiked. "You said no one followed you?" I thought not," she whispered. Ethan grabbed his rifle from the truck bed outside, while Rachel doused the diner's single lantern. Through the frost-covered glass, they saw two dark SUVs stopping on the road. Men stepped out, silhouettes armed, scanning the area. Reeves's voice, unmistakable even through the wind. "Spread out. The reporter's here." Ethan turned to Rachel. "There's a back door leading to the hangar," he said. "We move now, or we don't move at all." She nodded, clutching Liam's hand. Ash led the way, muscles tensed, nose low to the ground. They slipped into the shadows behind the building, snow crunching beneath their boots. As the first beam of a flashlight cut across the diner, Ethan glanced back once. Reeves stood in the doorway, scanning the room where they had sat minutes earlier. They vanished into the forest trail, the darkness swallowing them whole. For now, the storm was their only ally. The wind had quieted by the time Ethan led the truck back toward the ridge where Eden's vault lay buried, but the sky above still churned with low, heavy clouds. The headlights carved a path through the snow, their glow swallowed by fog. Rachel sat in the passenger seat, face pale beneath the flicker of light, her auburn hair damp with melting frost. Liam slept in the back seat, wrapped in a blanket, his small hands gripping Ash's collar as if the dog's steady warmth was the only safe thing left in the world. Ash, patient and watchful, rested his head beside the boy, his amber eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. As the vehicle rumbled to a stop near the ice field, Tom Rivera was already waiting. The old geologist looked smaller against the vast white expanse, wrapped in a fur-lined parka, snow dusting his gray beard. His broad face was lined from years of harsh winters, but tonight it carried a shadow of unease. "You shouldn't have come back," he said as Ethan stepped out. "If Reeves is still searching, you're walking into a death trap." Ethan checked his rifle and gave a quiet reply. "Then I guess we make it quick." Tom sighed, his breath forming clouds. "I scanned the ship again after you left. There's still power in the cryo chamber. Whatever's running hasn't died in 40 years. Inside, the corridor smelled of rust, oil, and age." Ethan's flashlight swept across walls, streaked with frost, revealing half-broken signs. Containment Sector B, Bioarchive Lab. Ash padded ahead, ears twitching. The air grew colder as they descended. Rachel followed behind Ethan, clutching a portable recorder and murmuring quietly, half to herself, "If this is what they buried, it's not a vault. It's a tomb." They reached the chamber at the far end of the ship. Rows of shattered cryotanks lined the walls like coffins. Only one remained intact, its glass covered in a film of frost that pulsed faintly from within. A dim blue light blinked. At the base, life support still functioning. Tom wiped the frost with his glove and froze. "Jesus," he whispered. Inside lay a small girl, maybe 9 or 10, her hair pale blonde, floating around her face in a halo of frozen strands. Her skin was translucent, almost luminous, her chest rising ever so slightly with the rhythm of shallow breaths. Rachel stepped closer, trembling. The label on the console read, "Subject 07, Eden Prototype, Do Not Revive." Her voice shook. "They stored a child here, not a sample. A living person." Tom's brow furrowed as he began checking the console. His gloved hands moved carefully over the controls. Vitals minimal but active. Whoever she is, her body's been in stasis for decades. This isn't cloning, it's genetic preservation. He paused, scanning the readouts. Her DNA markers are human, but enhanced. She's resistant to almost every known pathogen. She's real, not a test tube creation, Rachel whispered. They wanted to build a generation immune to the world's mistakes. Ethan watched the child in silence, his reflection faint in the glass. Something in her stillness stirred memories he had spent years trying to bury. A hospital hallway, the sound of monitors flatlining. The image of his daughter, same age, same fragility, slipping away while he was halfway around the world. He clenched his fists. "We can't leave her here." Tom looked up sharply. "If you pull her out, her body might not survive the transition. And if North Point finds out, they'll come after all of us." Ethan's tone was steady but hard. "They're already coming. I won't let another kid die in a government freezer." He knelt beside the control panel, tracing the faded instructions. Rachel stood beside him, her eyes wet but determined. "If we wake her, what happens?" she asked quietly. "She'll wake up in a world she doesn't know. No family, no past," Ethan replied. "Then she'll start new with people who won't use her." Tom hesitated, then nodded. "There's a manual override in the secondary grid. It'll release the stasis pressure slowly. But once it starts, there's no stopping it." Ash growled softly as the machinery came to life. Steam hissed from the vents, and frost cracked like thin glass. The console lights flickered yellow, then green. The girl's fingers twitched against the glass. A slow heartbeat echoed through the speakers. Rachel pressed her hand against the chamber, whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now." Then, for the first time in 40 years, the pod opened. A gust of cold vapor flooded the room. The girl gasped weakly, eyelids fluttering. Ethan caught her before she fell, his arms steady around her fragile frame. Her skin was icy, her breath shallow. She whispered something too faint to hear, then went still again, unconscious but alive. Tom checked her pulse. "It's weak, but she's stable. We need warmth, fast." Rachel wrapped her coat around the girl as they hurried back toward the exit. Behind them, alarms began to hum. The old systems had detected unauthorized activity. Red lights pulsed through the corridors. Ethan didn't look back. "Move," he said. "We've just declared war on North Point." Outside, snow whipped through the air again, covering their tracks almost as quickly as they formed. Ethan looked down at the girl cradled in his arms, her head resting against his chest, strands of her pale hair fluttering in the wind. "You're safe now, kid," he murmured. "I'll keep you that way." Snow tore through the night like shrapnel, devouring all sound and shape. The storm had grown worse, and the headlights of Ethan's truck barely cut through the blizzard. Behind them, black vehicles moved across the ridge, sleek, armored, and relentless. Reeves' men were closing in. Ethan gripped the wheel, his knuckles white, the engine growling beneath the pressure of the snow. Ash sat in the back, alert, his fur bristling. Rachel held the little girl, still unconscious, wrapped in her parka. Her pale hair spilled over Rachel's arm, almost glowing against the darkness. Reeves' voice came through the radio they had recovered from one of his fallen men. "Team Bravo, seal the South Ridge. They have the child. Do not let them reach the mine roads." His tone was calm but sharp, the voice of a man who had hunted before and rarely failed. Reeves himself sat in a command vehicle nearby, helmet off, revealing a face cut from stone. His dark blonde hair was cropped short. His eyes, a hard gray blue, carried the look of someone who'd stopped believing in mercy long ago. Once a soldier, now a corporate ghost, Reeves had traded duty for survival. The scar down his jaw, a relic from an ambush in Mosul, was a reminder that sentiment got men killed. Ethan made a sharp turn, tires skidding. "They're boxing us in," he muttered. Rachel looked at him, face pale. "What do we do?" "Lose them in the quarry," Ethan said. "There's an old mining site east of here. The tunnels still go deep." He knew the terrain well. During his Marine years, his unit had trained in similar ice caverns. He shut off the headlights and let gravity carry the truck downhill through the dark. The sound of engines behind them grew faint. They reached the quarry, an open pit carved into the mountain decades ago, now buried under drifts of snow. Ethan parked behind a rusted excavator, motioned for silence, and led them on foot. The storm masked their footprints as Ash guided them toward a narrow entrance half collapsed by ice. Inside, The air was still, cold as the grave. Their breath fogged in the darkness. Rachel set the girl down gently on an old tarp. The child stirred, her eyelids fluttering. When she finally opened her eyes, they were a startling shade of blue, clear, fragile, and hauntingly familiar. She looked around in confusion, her voice trembling. "Where am I?" Ethan knelt beside her. "You're safe now," he said softly. She blinked, studying his face, then whispered, "Are you my father?" The words hit him like a blade. For a moment, the cave seemed to vanish, replaced by memory, the hospital fire, the flames, the sound of his daughter calling out as he failed to reach her. He looked at the girl again. Her face mirrored that same innocent shape, the same eyes. Rachel watched silently, realizing something she dared not speak aloud. Ethan swallowed hard, his voice barely steady. "No, sweetheart," he said, "but I'll keep you safe. I promise." Outside, Reeves' men combed the storm. One of them, Agent Miles, a tall, gaunt man with a trimmed beard and a prosthetic left hand, led the forward search. Miles had been with Reeves since their army days, a loyal but broken soul who hid his pain behind sarcasm. "No tracks," he said through the radio, his voice dry. "Either they're ghosts or this storm's doing us favors," Reeves replied. "Keep looking. He won't leave the girl." Men like Cole never leave loose ends. Back in the cave, Rachel worked on building a small heat source from emergency flares. The dim light painted their faces in orange glow. The girl's name they discovered from a tag on her cryo gown was Eva. She sat up slowly, clutching Ash's fur. The dog remained perfectly still, protective yet gentle, his tail sweeping the ground once. "He won't hurt you," Ethan assured her. "He's family." Tom's voice crackled through Ethan's old radio, distorted by static. "Ethan, Reeves has choppers heading your way. You have maybe 15 minutes before they sweep the valley." Ethan's mind raced. "Then we move through the old shafts," he said. "There's an exit north that leads to the riverbed." He looked at Rachel, then at Eva. "Stay close. Don't stop for anything." They packed up quickly, the small warmth of the flare dying behind them. As they disappeared into the winding tunnels, the girl reached for Ethan's hand. He didn't pull away. Outside, searchlights began sweeping the snow, and Reeves stood on the ridge, watching the storm devour his prey. "Run, Marine," he murmured under his breath. "You can't outrun what you're protecting." Ethan didn't look back. The wind howled louder, carrying their footprints into oblivion. The storm eased by morning, leaving behind a pale stillness. The world was white and hollow, the air heavy with silence as Ethan's group trudged through the frozen forest. Ahead, half hidden under snowdrifts, stood the abandoned Arctic Weather Research Station, a squat metal structure scarred by rust and decades of neglect. "This used to be my post," Tom murmured, his breath fogging the air. His heavy coat could not hide the limp in his right leg, a reminder of an avalanche years ago that had taken his wife. The accident had hardened him, turned his warmth into wary silence. Now, his sharp brown eyes scanned the horizon for movement before he pushed open the station door. Inside, dust motes drifted in the shafts of gray light, cutting through broken windows. The faint hum of dying generators still echoed somewhere deep below. Rachel set Eva down near an old heater and brushed snow from her auburn hair. The child was weak, but conscious, her pale face turned toward Ash, who lay beside her with one paw bandaged from the night's escape. The dog's breathing was shallow, but steady. Ethan crouched to check him, running a rough hand over his fur. "Hang on, buddy," he whispered. Ash blinked in acknowledgement, tail thumping once. Tom descended into the basement to reconnect the old power lines. Sparks flickered, and several monitors came to life. Static filled the air before resolving into files marked Eden Archive 1983. Ethan and Rachel leaned closer as Tom clicked open one. The flickering image of a man appeared, Dr. Henry Ward, late 60s, bald on top but with a neat gray beard and clear, tired eyes. He wore a white lab coat with a faded defense emblem on the sleeve. His voice was calm but carried a weight of confession. "This message is for whoever uncovers Eden. We failed. We thought we could preserve humanity, but we only preserved our arrogance. Out of hundreds of candidates, only 12 children carried what we called the pure genome. 11 were lost in containment failure. The last, subject 07, was sealed under emergency protocol. She is not a test subject. She is the future we stole." Rachel's hand trembled as she replayed the clip. "He's admitting it," she said. "This wasn't preservation, it was selection. They were creating a species, not saving one." Ethan's face darkened. "And Reeves is trying to keep it buried." Rachel nodded, already typing on her laptop. "If I can transmit this footage to my contact in D.C., it might force the truth out before they shut it down again." She connected to a satellite uplink, and for a moment, the signal caught. Data streamed out into the void. But outside, a red light blinked atop the station antenna, an alert signal. Tom's voice cut through the radio. "Ethan, you need to move." North Point's picking up the transmission. Through the cracked window, headlights pierced the snowstorm. Black armored trucks approaching fast. Ethan grabbed his rifle. "Rachel, get Eva ready. We're leaving." The first gunshots shattered the stillness. Reeves' men fanned out, firing toward the building. Glass exploded inward. Ethan returned fire through the doorway while Tom scrambled toward the gas line. "We can't outshoot them," Tom shouted. "But we can outburn them." He tore open a maintenance panel, revealing a rusted gas valve. Ethan's eyes widened. "Tom, don't." But Tom only smiled faintly. "It's okay, brother. I've been running from ghosts long enough." He turned the valve. The air filled with the hiss of escaping gas. "Get them out!" he yelled. Ethan grabbed Rachel and Eva, leading them toward the rear exit. Ash limped after them, growling low as bullets ricocheted off the walls. Tom lit his flare and tossed it behind him. The explosion tore through the station with a roar, flames leaping into the snowstorm. The blast threw Ethan to the ground. When he looked back, the station was engulfed in fire. Tom Rivera, soldier of the ice, was gone. Reeves stumbled from the blast zone, half his face burned, rifle still in hand. He caught sight of Ethan carrying Eva and raised his weapon, but before he could fire, Ash lunged from the smoke, teeth sinking into Reeves's arm. The two struggled at the edge of a frozen crevasse. "Ash, no!" Ethan shouted, but the ground gave way. Reeves and the dog tumbled into the icy depths, their cries swallowed by the storm. Ethan dropped to his knees beside the crevasse, calling softly. Only silence answered. Rachel touched his shoulder, eyes glistening. "He saved us." Ethan nodded, his voice breaking. "He always did." They turned away as dawn broke faintly over the horizon. Snowflakes drifted through the rising smoke, settling gently on the frozen ground where two friends had fallen. Weeks passed since the fire at the weather station. The snow began to soften under a shy sun, and the frozen world, that had once swallowed everything, started to breathe again. Ethan's cabin stood quietly at the edge of a thawing forest, rough pine walls, a smoking chimney, and the smell of wood and coffee in the morning air. Inside, warmth flickered against the windows. Eva sat on the floor beside the fireplace, building a small wooden house out of old matchboxes. Her hair had grown longer, soft gold catching the light. Near her feet lay a young German shepherd pup with black and white fur, its eyes curious, its ears still too big for its head. Ethan had named him Ash II in memory of his fallen companion. The pup wagged his tail each time Eva giggled, as though he understood the meaning of peace. Rachel arrived that afternoon, her figure emerging from the snowy path. She wore a long, dark coat and carried a small folder under one arm. Her auburn hair fluttered in the cold breeze, and there was both exhaustion and quiet triumph in her gray eyes. Months of sleepless nights and risk had carved sharper edges into her face, yet her resolve glowed stronger than ever. She smiled when she saw Ethan chopping firewood near the porch. "You look like you finally stopped running," she said. Ethan wiped sweat from his brow and smiled faintly. "Maybe for now, Inside, Rachel handed him the folder. "The investigation's over," she said. "North Point executives are under trial. The Eden's Vault data has been released publicly." Her tone softened. "I kept Eva's identity out of it. As far as the world knows, Subject 07 never survived." Ethan exhaled, shoulders relaxing for the first time in years. "You did the right thing." Rachel shrugged lightly. "Maybe, but you're the one who kept her alive." Eva ran up, holding out a hand-drawn picture, a crude crayon sketch of Ethan, Rachel, and the puppy under a bright sun. "Look," she said proudly. Rachel knelt, admiring it. "That's beautiful, sweetheart." Eva smiled, missing one front tooth. "Daddy says we can plant trees when spring comes." Ethan froze for half a second at the word daddy, but didn't correct her. Instead, he knelt and brushed a lock of hair from her face. "Then we'd better start soon." Outside, the snow melted into rivulets that glistened like silver veins. The forest echoed with birds returning after the long silence. Rachel stood beside Ethan on the porch, watching Eva chase Ash II across the yard. "You've spent your life protecting this country," she said softly. "But now, you're guarding something far greater, humanity's heart." Ethan's eyes lifted to the horizon, where sunlight spread over the ice like liquid gold. "If anything deserves a second chance," he murmured, "it's compassion." As the sun climbed higher, the camera of memory seemed to pull away past the cabin, the forest, and the melting lakes. Beneath the thawing ice miles away, the rusted hull of Eden's Vault rested in silence. The snow above it shimmered with reflected light, sealing the past where it belonged. Humanity's future, fragile yet alive, had already begun again in the laughter of a child and the heartbeat of a small, loyal dog. In the end, Ethan's story reminds us that miracles are not always made of light or thunder. Sometimes they are found in the quiet acts of kindness that restore faith in a broken world. God does not always appear in fire or glory. He lives in every heart that chooses compassion over fear, mercy over vengeance. As we walk through our own winters, may we remember that love is the greatest miracle of all. If this story touched your soul, share it with others, leave a comment to spread hope, and subscribe to join our growing circle of faith and light. May God bless and protect all who still believe that even after the darkest night, a new dawn will always come.